Welcome to Bloodshed Breakdown, where slasher films meet chilling conspiracy theories. We dive deep into the gore, mystery, and the sinister truths behind the stories you love.
You better grab your popcorn and prepare for the fright of your life.
Because today,
You're going deep.
into Terrifier 3.
Oh, yeah.
And you guys have given us a mountain of articles and fan theories and even some of your own thoughts. It's clear that you are ready to dissect what this next chapter of art, the clown's reign of terror.
To terror might hold. For sure. And I think there's a good reason for all this excitement. You know, Terrifier doesn't just rely on those cheap jump scares. It tacks into something much deeper. You know, that graphic violence, the unsettling ambiguity of art's motives, it all creates this almost unbearable tension that just gets under your skin.
Yeah, it's definitely not a franchise for the faint of heart.
No.
That's for sure. But for those of us who can stomach it, Terrifier 2 left us with a ton of unanswered questions. I mean, we went from a fairly straightforward slasher in the first film to something.
Right.
Something much darker and more complex.
Yeah. That shift to the supernatural opens up a lot of fascinating possibilities for Terrifier 3. All of your sources confirm that art is back, but how is the real mystery? Bringing back a villain, that's like horror 101. But Terrifier has always been about subverting expectations.
So we're not talking about a simple, he survived the last movie kind of a comeback.
It seems unlikely. The sources, especially those fan theories that you sent, are leaning towards something a little more supernatural. We saw hints of like demonic influence in Terrifier 2, particularly with that creepy little girl.
Oh, yeah.
In the Halloween store.
Right. And that final scene with Sienna bathed in that strange light, it definitely felt like she tapped into something beyond, normal. Do you think those supernatural elements are going to be even more prominent?
I do.
In Terrifier 3?
I think it's inevitable. Terrifier is evolving. It's moving away from that pure slasher territory into something more psychological, more cosmic horror. And I think that raises the stakes considerably. It's no longer just about surviving the night. It's about confronting these forces beyond our comprehension.
That's where things get really interesting for me. Because if art isn't just a human killer anymore, if he's a conduit for something darker, well, that changes everything.
It does. And some of your sources hint at just how much that might change. The descriptions of the kills in Terrifier 3, even just the rumors circulating online, they suggest Leone is going for something even more extreme, more visceral.
You know, some horror fans would say there's a limit, a point where it becomes too much.
Yeah.
But I think Terrifier's audience expects that kind of boundary pushing. What do you think? Is there a point where gore stops being effective, where it just becomes gratuitous?
It's a fascinating debate, right? Some argue that extreme gore can desensitize viewers, diminishing the horror. But Leone, he seems to use it very deliberately. It's not just about the shock value. It's about creating the sense of unease, of violating taboos, and forcing us to confront our own mortality.
And Terrifier definitely does that. But you've mentioned a couple times how the sources you're looking at are pointing to a potential storyline that could be really impactful. I'm on the edge of my seat here. What are we talking about?
Well, there's a lot of speculation online about Sienna's role in Terrifier 3. Remember, at the end of Terrifier 2, she seemed to inherit some of Art's darkness.
Yeah, almost like she was chosen to carry on his legacy of terror.
Exactly. And a few of these fan theories speculate that Terrifier 3 might just flip the script. What if Sienna becomes the antagonist?
Oh.
What if she's the one wielding the supernatural forces now?
Oh, that's a twisted thought. I love it. Imagine a final girl turned villain.
Right.
Haunted by her encounter with art and now embracing the darkness. It's like a dark mirror reflection of the classic final girl trope.
That's one of the things that makes Terrifier so compelling. It takes these familiar horror tropes and twists them into something truly unsettling. And that brings us back to Damien Leone himself. He's not just a gorehound. He's a filmmaker with a vision, a deep understanding of how to manipulate audience expectations and create something truly disturbing.
And you mentioned earlier that his style is evolving, that Terrifier 3 is going to be even more ambitious than the previous films. What can you tell us about Leone's approach, his influences?
Well, he's a huge fan of classic Italian horror.
Okay.
Particularly the Giallo films of the 70s and 80s.
Oh, cool.
These films were known for their stylish visuals, their psychological tension, and their often surreal approach to violence. And you can definitely see those influences in Leone's work.
So we're not just talking about mindless splatter. There's an artistry to the way Leone crafts his scares. And with a bigger budget for Terrifier 3, I imagine he's going to be able to realize his vision on an even grander scale.
Absolutely. We can expect more elaborate set pieces, more complex special effects, and, dare I say, even more creative ways, too.
Oh, gosh.
Well, let's just say Art's going to have a lot more toys to play with.
Okay, now I'm both excited and terrified.
Yeah.
But there's another big question lurking in the shadows here.
Hmm.
How does all this supernatural stuff connect to the real world? The sources you've been looking at, especially the fan theories, they seem to be diving into some pretty wild territory.
That's where things get really interesting and perhaps a little unsettling. The fan community has been digging deep,
Yeah.
looking for connections to real-world mythology, folklore,
Right.
even demonic entities. And some of their theories are, well, let's just say they're enough to give you nightmares.
So we're not just talking about a killer clown anymore.
No.
We're talking about something ancient,
Mm-hmm.
something evil.
That seems to be the direction Terrifier is heading. And I think that's what makes this depth dive so exciting. We're not just dissecting a movie. We're exploring the dark side of human consciousness, the things that scare us on a primal level.
All right, you've officially piqued my curiosity. Let's dive into those fan theories. I want to hear about the creepy connections they've uncovered.
Yeah. Let's start with one that keeps popping up. The idea of Art as a demonic entity. Some fans are drawing parallels to figures like Asmodeus, a demon associated with lust, wrath, and Tyke. Well, a penchant for chaos.
Asmodeus, huh?
Mm.
That sounds right up Art's alley. The trickster element, the sadistic pleasure he takes in tormenting his victims, it definitely fits. But Asmodeus is a pretty heavy-duty demon. We're talking biblical levels of evil here.
And that's what makes this theory so intriguing. It suggests that Art isn't just a random killer. He's fulfilling a darker purpose, perhaps even serving as a conduit for something ancient and malevolent.
Okay, now I'm getting chills. It's like Art is a manifestation of our collective shadow self, all the darkness and violence we repress bubbling up to the surface.
Yeah.
It's pretty heady stuff for a slasher film, but I think that's what elevates Terrifier beyond simple gore. There's a deeper layer of meaning there, something that speaks to our primal fears.
Precisely. And that's what we'll be exploring as we continue this deep dive. We'll be looking at those fan theories, those connections to real-world myths and legends, and trying to understand what they tell us about Terrifier 3 and the dark heart of humanity.
Well, you've given us a lot to think about already, but I'm eager to hear more about those fan theories. What other creepy connections have they uncovered?
One that I find particularly fascinating is the link to ancient trickster spirits, figures who revel in deception and violence. These entities often appear in folklore across cultures, embodying the chaotic and unpredictable forces of nature.
Now that you mention it, there is a definite trickster element to Art's personality. He loves to play with his victims, toying with them before delivering the final blow. It's like he gets as much pleasure out of the psychological torture as the physical violence.
Exactly. And that connection to trickster mythology adds a whole new layer of depth to Art's character. It suggests that his actions aren't just random acts of cruelty. They're part of a larger, more primal pattern of behavior, a dance between chaos and order that has been playing out since the dawn of humanity.
Wow, that's some deep stuff. But it makes you wonder, if Art is embodying this ancient archetype, what does that mean for his victims? Are they just pawns in some cosmic game? Or is there a deeper meaning to their suffering?
That's a question that haunts me, and it's one that I think Terrifier 3 might explore. Remember, we're dealing with a film that is steeped in the supernatural, where the lines between reality and nightmare are blurred.
All right, we're about to go full conspiracy theory here, but I'm game. What are you thinking?
Well, what if the victims in Terrifier aren't just random targets? What if they're chosen, selected for a specific purpose?
Okay, now you're really freaking me out. Chosen for what? What kind of purpose could there possibly be to all this carnage?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And I don't have the answer. But I do think that Leone is playing with some very powerful ideas here, ideas that tap into our deepest fears and anxieties.
It's like he's holding up a mirror to society, showing us the darkness that lurks beneath the surface, the potential for violence that exists within us all. But you know, as much as I love dissecting the deeper meaning of Terrifier, I also have to admit that I'm a sucker for a good scare.
Of course. And let's not forget that Terrifier, at its core, is a horror film. It's designed to entertain, to thrill, and yes, to terrify. And from what I've seen in these sources, Terrifier 3 is going to deliver on all those fronts. We're talking about a film that's pushing the boundaries of gore, special effects, and psychological terror.
I'm ready to be both horrified and entertained. But before we go any further, I think it's time to bring in another expert voice. Someone who can shed some light on the psychological impact of Terrifier. Someone who can help us understand why we're so drawn to these stories of darkness and violence.
I think that's an excellent idea. After all, understanding our fascination with horror is just as important as understanding the films themselves.
Absolutely. So, for our listeners, stay tuned. We'll be right back after a quick break to introduce our special guest and dive even deeper into the dark heart of Terrifier 3.
So we were just talking about art as like this conduit for something ancient and malevolent.
Right.
And you've got some theories in your research that tie into that idea pretty directly, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's like the fans have been doing their own deep dives,
Yeah.
connecting Terrifier to all sorts of real-world myths and legends.
Okay.
Some of this stuff gets pretty wild.
Well, let's unpack a few of those. One theory that really caught my eye connects art to the concept of the shadow self, a term from Jungian psychology.
Okay, I have to admit, my psychology knowledge is a little bit rusty.
Yeah.
Could you give us a quick explainer on that?
Sure. So Carl Jung, a famous psychologist, he talked about the shadow self as this hidden part of our personality where we repress all of those urges and instincts that society deems unacceptable.
Okay.
It's the dark side we try to keep hidden.
So basically, all the stuff we'd never want to admit to, even to ourselves.
Exactly. And Jung believed that confronting our shadow is essential for psychological wholeness. Now, where this ties into Terrifier is that art, with his grotesque appearance and sadistic behavior, could be seen as a manifestation of that collective shadow.
So it's like he's acting out all the dark impulses that we try to suppress. That's actually pretty brilliant when you think about it.
It's one of the things that makes Terrifier so unsettling. It's not just about being scared of a killer clown. It's about confronting the darkness within ourselves, that potential for evil we all carry. And that's a theme that resonates, I think, very deeply with horror fans.
You know, when I first watched Terrifier 2, that scene where art, well, I won't spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it, but let's just say there's a mirror involved. That scene really messed with me.
Oh, yeah.
It felt like I was looking into my own shadow self, and it wasn't pretty.
That's a perfect example of how Leone uses horror to tap into those deep psychological fears.
Yeah.
He's not just going for cheap thrills.
No.
He's making us confront the monsters within.
And speaking of monsters, there's another theory in these sources that connects art to urban legends, those creepy stories we tell each other about, hook-handed killers and things that go bump in the night.
Urban legends are fascinating because they reflect our anxieties about the unknown,
Right.
the things that lurk in the shadows. And art, with his painted face and unsettling grin,
Yeah.
he embodies that same sense of unease, that feeling that something sinister is hiding just around the corner.
It's like he stepped straight out of a campfire story, turning like a figure of fun, a clown, into something truly terrifying.
Yeah.
And that subversion of expectations, that's what makes him such an effective horror icon.
He plays on our deepest fears, those primal instincts that tell us to be wary of the things we don't understand, the things that look different.
But let's be honest, as much as we're analyzing the deeper meaning of Terrifier,
Yeah.
we're also here for the gore, the spectacle of it all. And the sources you've been looking at suggest that Leone is really pushing the boundaries
is.
for Terrifier 3.
The descriptions of the kills, even the rumors circulating online, are intense. It seems like Leone is taking full advantage of the larger budget to create something truly unforgettable.
Right.
And perhaps, for some viewers, unwatchable.
Yeah, that brings up a question that's always debated in the horror community.
Oh, yeah.
Is there a limit to how much gore is too much? Does it desensitize viewers or does it enhance the horror?
It's a complex issue. Some argue that excessive gore can have a numbing effect, leading to a kind of emotional detachment. But others, myself included, believe that when it's used artfully, gore can amplify the horror, making it more visceral, more real.
And I think Leone falls into that latter camp. He's not just throwing blood and guts at the screen for shock value. He's using it to create a specific atmosphere.
Right.
A sense of dread and transgression that you just don't get with more restrained horror films.
Exactly. It's about breaking taboos, forcing the audience to confront the fragility of the human body, the thin line between life and death.
You know, it's interesting to think about how Terrifier has evolved from that first film, which was pretty much a straight-up slasher, to this much darker, more complex story with supernatural elements.
Yeah.
What do you think is driving that evolution?
I think Leone is tapping into a growing hunger for horror that goes beyond the superficial.
Yeah.
Audiences today are more sophisticated,
Mm.
more demanding. They want something that challenges them, something that makes them think,
Right.
something that stays with them long after the credits roll.
And Terrifier definitely delivers on that front.
Yeah.
It's a film that gets under your skin that stays with you long after you've seen it.
And I think that's what makes it so exciting to speculate about Terrifier 3. We know it's going to be bigger, bolder, and more terrifying than anything Leone has done before. But what form will that terror take? What dark corners of the human psyche will he explore?
Those are the questions that keep me up at night. But unfortunately, we're going to have to leave our listeners hanging for a bit. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
Yeah.
But there's still so much more to explore.
We've only just scratched the surface of the fan theories and the potential connections to real-world mythology. And there's a whole other side to Terrifier that we haven't even touched on yet. The psychological impact of this kind of extreme horror.
Well, don't worry, folks. We'll be back soon to delve even deeper into the world of Terrifier 3.
It's really amazing, isn't it? As we sort of wrap up this deep dive into Terrifier 3, it's striking how this franchise has just captured the imaginations of so many people.
It really has.
Yeah.
And it's gone way beyond, just those of us who love a good slasher flick.
Yeah.
You've got folks digging into mythology, psychology, even philosophy.
Right.
All trying to unpack what Terrifier is really all about.
It's a testament to Leone's ability to create something that works on these multiple levels.
Yeah.
On the surface, you've got those visceral thrills, the shocking gore, the undeniable entertainment value of a truly terrifying villain.
Right.
But underneath that, there's this depth, a willingness to explore the darker aspects of humanity that resonates with audiences on a much deeper level.
It's like those classic monster movies where the creature represents something more than just, a physical threat. It becomes a symbol of our fears, our anxieties, the things we try to keep hidden from ourselves.
Now, with Terrifier, that symbolism is amplified by the extreme violence.
Right.
The almost surreal nature of art's actions. It's a kind of grotesque carnival mirror reflecting back our own capacity for cruelty.
I'm curious, from your perspective, what do you think Terrifier 3 needs to do to really deliver on its potential? I mean, we've talked about these fan theories, these potential storylines, but what would make this film truly stand out, not just as a sequel, but as a statement?
I think it needs to strike a balance between satisfying those visceral cravings, the gore, the scares, the over-the-top violence, and pushing those deeper themes even further. We need to see Leone exploring the consequences of that supernatural shift, the implications of art's potential connection to something ancient and evil.
So not just bigger and bloodier, but also smarter, more thought-provoking.
Exactly. We need those holy crap moments,
Right.
but we also need those moments that make you pause, that make you question what you're seeing, what it says about us as human beings.
And what about you, personally? What are you most excited or maybe terrified to see in Terrifier 3?
Honestly, I'm most intrigued by Sienna's journey.
Okay.
We saw her tap into something dark and powerful at the end of Terrifier 2, and I want to see where Leone takes that. Will she become a new kind of final girl, warrior against the darkness, or will she succumb to the same evil that consumed art?
Ooh, those are great questions, and ones that unfortunately we'll have to wait for the film to answer. But even without those concrete answers, this deep dive has given us a lot to chew on. We've explored the evolution of the franchise, the deepening supernatural elements, the psychological complexities of art as a character, and even the impact of extreme horror on audiences.
And we delved into those fascinating fan theories, those connections to real-world mythology and folklore that add another layer of depth to the Terrifier universe.
We've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
But I think the most important takeaway is that Terrifier is more than just a mindless splatterfest. It's a film that's tapping into something primal, something that speaks to our deepest fears and anxieties.
Right.
And that's what makes it so compelling, so disturbing, and ultimately so unforgettable.
Well said. And for our listeners, as you eagerly await the release of Terrifier 3, keep those fan theories coming, keep digging into those myths and legends.
Yes.
And most importantly, keep those lights on.
Yeah.
You never know what might be lurking in the shadows.
Thanks for tuning in. Subscribe, review, and grab our merch at bloodshedbreakdown-merch.printify.me.